Today is Monday, June 9th, and we've got jam-packed session for all of you today. First topic, OpenAI just got their hand slapped. Every single log must be kept. What does that mean for you and the stuff that you ask ChatGPT? Second story, AT&T. They were hacked back in 2021. Everything came out again in 2024. It's back. The Grim Reaper has brought the data back from the dead, and now it has social security numbers linked to it. What are we supposed to do? Third topic, cyber resilience. I've got some questions, and I got two legends in with me today. So we're going to go through that.
All right. This is the DTF Cyber Podcast. I'm Damian.
This is Troy.
It's your boy, Fern. Let's go. So, ChatGPT has saved me on a number of occasions. Mostly to do with audio and video, because I don't know what I'm doing with this stuff. I just got a bunch of stuff that I bought. Can't really use it, but ChatGPT helps me out a lot. Now, I ask it a lot of random questions, but I know there's people out there that tell themselves they want to be better at their job, which is kind of like what I'm doing, right? So they'll log into a GPT. They'll have it. Some people from Samsung may or may not have entered in some code that is now available to everyone, right? But there's this recent ruling, or at least position, that was
It's like a court order.
okay. I wasn't sure the right word. Court order saying everything that you, as a consumer, enter into ChatGPT must be kept. Records of that must be kept, so the logs are kept. Now, I'm gonna just pretend to be an average Joe. Okay, I'm average Joe today. I'm not Fern. I'm average Joe. Now, average Fern. I'm just a little baby Fern, not big Fern, just a little Fern. And I'm gonna take a stance that I think a lot of people have. Whether it's mine, we don't know, because I'm pretending right now. So here's my position for both of you guys to think about. I don't necessarily care. When I hop on ChatGPT, I tell it, hey, how do I, how many quarts are in a gallon, right? Most people should know stuff like that. Not everyone does. How do I do this with my camera? How do I do that? From my perspective, maybe I don't necessarily care if that information is kept, because what are they going to find out? That I can't use my own equipment, right? That I don't necessarily know how to measure. Like I in a lot of ways use ChatGPT, hypothetically speaking, as a way for me just to get a quick answer. So if someone keeps record of that, all they really know is that I just don't know a lot of things, right?
No, I think there's more to it than that, right? So you just admitted, well, I'm getting instructions on how to use my camera or my equipment.
Yeah.
Now it knows what equipment you have. It sort of knows what you're working on. If you ask it about personal questions, now it knows about your family.
Like if I ask for marriage advice.
Oh, then it knows you have a marital issue.
Yeah. Okay.
So you add all these things up. It's not just one or two things, but if now they're able to store that, I mean, I think it's already learning about you in the process.
Yeah.
You can ask to, tell me what you know about me, and it'll probably spit out something.
So that's okay. So that's that. Now I'm going to maybe average Joe this and say, well, Google does that already, right? I hop on Google and ask the same exact stuff that I might ask a ChatGPT or any other tool, AI tool that helps me, like Perplexity, and there's a few other ones, right? Like the Claude and Gronk, I think is another. So I ask Google all the time. If I have an Android phone, I'm logged in on a Google account. I click on Google search bar. It's going, like, Google has access to this information. Google owns YouTube. So whatever I do on YouTube is now linked to my Google account. I literally have a Google account where I go into YouTube and it says, here's your Gmail email. Like, people already know this stuff about me. So what's any different now?
I think this goes back to privacy, right? So if you think about, this slippery slope of, okay, they know what kind of camera equipment you have, but all of a sudden, if you start putting these pieces together, not just ChatGPT, but websites in general tend to have way too much information and store for much longer than we think they might, right? So this is where some of the laws come around for, forget my data and remove my data from your site. And so some of those things. But we talked about this a few weeks back where ChatGPT was getting sued by the New York Times for, getting around the paywall, and people were using ChatGPT to get information that they would otherwise have to pay for. So this was a lawsuit that was filed from the New York Times against OpenAI, which caused what, Damian and I are familiar with, which is called a legal hold, right? So whenever a company gets a subpoena, they usually have to put a legal hold on all of the employees and the data around that particular legal case. And so in this case, it's everything. And unfortunately, that means all of our data is going to be stored indefinitely at OpenAI. Now that does two things. Number one, it leaves our data in a place at risk potentially for a long time. And number two, it dramatically increases the amount of storage and long-term archival that OpenAI is going to have to pay for, which is going to, potentially create a lot of costs for them, which is going to drive our costs up. But also, it's also going to just keep our data out there at risk for much, much longer periods of time.
It's a lot more than, what these LLMs are learning about you personally. But the question now becomes, where are they storing that data, and is it at risk? Right. So if somebody else gets a hold of it, is that going to be a problem for you? So you're okay with OpenAI and ChatGPT having information about what cameras you have. But what if an attacker gets access to that and then sets you a phishing attempt to get you to click on a warranty or recall on some product that you have?
And Damian, you have to think about like this, right? We say, is it at risk? We don't know, right? Data is usually not at risk until you find out that it's been breached. You would think that ChatGPT has all this money and OpenAI has a lot of money to secure their systems. I'm sure they do, right? I mean, we can't predict what next threat actor is going to be out there, what next vulnerability is going to be taken advantage of. And so the data may not be at risk today, but if you have to store that for 20 years, as an example, there may come a time that it is at risk, that we have no idea that it's at risk. And trust me, if you ask ChatGPT, one of my favorite prompts is saying, everything you know about me, draw a picture of what you think I'm about. So they'll draw a picture of your life. It'll have something about your work, your cars, your family, your house, what it believes you look like. And it's pretty accurate.
Really?
You should try that.
So funny you should say. I saw this somewhere, and I actually asked it to do this, and I have the picture. It's wild. I'll put it next to me, but it's not actually a picture of me. I asked it to draw an image of how it would represent us and our conversations together, and it was real trippy. Like, I'll show you before we're done, and I'll put it on the episode. But I thought, man, should I be worried?
You mean us as this podcast, or you personally?
Me personally. So I asked it, draw an image of representing us as whatever, and in our interaction with each other. And it trust me.
Yeah. As an example, my picture came out as a guy working in a home office with cybersecurity on his screens, with a Corvette sitting just outside the window, and his family with kids that look about my kid's age out there playing in the yard. The only inaccuracy in the entire picture was there was a basketball on a shelf in the office, and I don't have a basketball. I don't watch basketball. So that's the one thing I would say was a little bit off, but it's amazing how much ChatGPT knew about me to draw that picture.
Yeah. So going back to what you said about the risk, I agree that your data is not necessarily at risk right now, but what this does is it opens up maybe a larger attack surface or potentially greater risk against that data.
Well, what about companies that use it? Because there's a lot of companies so last week we talked about how Troy mentioned how companies in the Bay Area are assigning an AI assistant to their new employees to help them with their job, right? So we're just going to assume maybe it's OpenAI's ChatGPT. Now all these developers or these new employees are using this AI assistant that technically has to keep logs of every conversation. And I would argue most of these conversations are going to be business related, potentially tap into IP to some extent, potentially, right? Unless they have programs or guardrails around how they actually use it. And we'll just assume that most people don't, right? Because not every organization is a Fortune 500 company. They don't necessarily think about these things this way. So maybe there's a smaller mid-market account that doesn't even have a CISO potentially, right? Maybe just have a security lead that isn't necessarily paying attention to what's happening with OpenAI and this court order. So their developers are going in and using it. And now a lot of what they know that's potentially IP is not only being entered into a tool, it's being stored potentially for someone else to steal. Is there an avenue for?
I think you're just by putting it in there, it's at, you're putting your company at risk if you're using it that way. Now, hopefully, we talked about this, right? There's an AI governance committee that you're looking at the use of AI or Gen AI within your organization. So if you're scared that it's being stored or cached and now the logs have been kept, I would question, why aren't you scared that it's being entered into a public LLM? So
I was in Atlanta last week at a conference talking to CISOs who say, in the beginning, we blocked ChatGPT by default. It was a big no. And then what they found was employees were going around it on their personal, computers using ChatGPT. So there's a lot of folks using Enterprise Edition with an API directly to OpenAI. So there's a lot of companies who are now embracing the AI model, the LLMs, the ChatGPTs. And so to Fern's point, absolutely, there's going to be intellectual property there. There's going to be trade secrets. There's going to be business-specific confidential information in those logs. And so, to your point, Damian, the risk that as time goes along, the risk increases for that data to have an issue.
Yeah, but wouldn't they also be worried that we're using their IP to train an LLM, even if it's not the public accessible one? You have a corporate instance. So don't you think they'd be worried about that?
Yeah, I think they are. And I think in these MSAs and the APIs, contracts between the two companies, there are specific safeguards for that. And so they were comfortable. I don't know that I would be. Depends on your business model, depends on your industry and what your regulations say you can do and you can't do. So I'm sure that each one of these security leaders, these are very large companies I was talking to. So they've already vetted it. There was somebody in the medical device industry. There was somebody in the food and agriculture industry and somebody in healthcare. So I think that these guys would, must know what's going on in that space, what I've seen. And that just tells me that this is evolving. It's evolving from we're not allowing it at all to we have to somehow let this thing work to now we're embracing it and our company's signing MSAs with it.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be concerned there, especially within healthcare, because if your health record is out and being used in these LLMs, aren't you scared of what would come up next time you ask ChatGPT to draw who you are, if it knows a little bit too much about your health information?
That's true. Absolutely. And I'm assuming, again, assumption here, that these are totally separate from a personal account. So if you're using ChatGPT at work as an example, on an enterprise edition, you're not putting stuff in there about your family or your house or your cars or your sports. But no, yeah, I would be certainly afraid that medical information would be in there and at risk.
Yeah, I'm worried that, the organizations that I'm dealing with or my healthcare providers taking my records. I mean, let's take, for example, discrimination against certain conditions. And if you know that this potential employee has a mental health problem, would you necessarily hire that person? Or are you going to discriminate against them because you're worried that they're not mentally stable? I mean, should you really know that at that time, early before you're hiring them? And so if you can go in and ask, and even though it's considered private, I'd be worried, right? That's not something that, from a privacy standpoint, it's something that I would trust a company to safeguard, right? We've seen this before where they say the information's safe. They say they're not keeping it, but at the end of the day, the information's there.
Yeah.
And somebody hacks into it and gets control of it.
Yeah, they say it's safe, and then you get a notice in the mail, something, we regret to inform you, blah, blah, blah. Here's a free credit monitoring app for the next 6 months. Okay, cool. But so when it comes to pre-existing health conditions, there's a lot of people that pay for medical care outside of insurance because insurance either doesn't cover it, or if insurance knew the risk of the person, say, for example, has whatever issue, their premiums go up or the business premiums go up, right? It's kind of similar to when they always ask you, do you smoke? How often do you exercise? They want to know, are you fat and lazy, or are you in good health? Because that's going to affect the price that we offer this business on their corporate plan. So there's a lot of people that have conditions that Google University to help them, right? And they might go see a specialist, but these are all cash transactions. They're all paid for in cash. They're not done. There's tons of places you can go to that do not accept insurance, right? And they operate this way because there's a lot of people that have conditions that they don't want anyone to know about because of the ramifications that it would do to their premiums otherwise. So if someone knows that you have a health condition and that gets into the hands of a health insurance company, I don't think I'm the only person that knows that insurance companies aren't necessarily they're there to protect someone, but it's definitely not you. Right.
They're to protect the bottom line. But Damian, I have a question for you. So how long do you honestly think it's going to be before healthcare insurers, healthcare providers come together and build this AI platform, like you just mentioned, where all of our data is up there, and then the AI can make insurability decisions based on all the information you just talked about? I know that we have all these safeguards in place from HIPAA and high trust and all the healthcare provisions, but how long do you really think it's going to be before someone gets around that, knocks that regulation down, adjusts it so that they can share information and apply AI at that level? It would be like almost like the progressive snapshot for your car, but for your healthcare. So they're going to know, what your conditions are and how to insure you.
So look, the number one problem we have is that all of our data is in different islands anyways, right? So one healthcare organization, one hospital might have a different EMR than the clinic you go to. And that may not line up with what your pharmacy has. And so to pull all that data together into one, I think we're a long ways off. It's going to have to be some sort of legislation that says we have to do this for the good of the population or the country.
Yeah.
But I don't see that happening anytime soon. And then even if it does, I'd be super worried about it because now you have a single repository that, could potentially have a security incident, and then all of our health records are out there. So it's one thing that, Fern, when you're saying they'll give you credit monitoring, that's fine. You can change your credit card numbers, can't change your social security number. But with healthcare, you really can't change who you are and you can't change your conditions. And so does that hurt you in the long run? And I don't even necessarily know if this is a problem with, these organizations knowing about it, because what we're doing is we're actually searching for the conditions on search engines or even in Gen AI to self-diagnose. And I think they can already tell, if you don't even tell it what your conditions you have, just by asking, it can infer. Yeah, make decisions based off of the questions you're asking.
Yeah, and not to get off track, I know we are way off from the article, but one thing that you just mentioned, so now all of our data is in these silos on these islands, but with the advent of easy, accessible APIs and AI that can go across those APIs, are they still on islands anymore? Because now that AI can move at the speed of light and go query all of the islands together, so now is it one homogeneous, silo of information, or is it still on the islands? So we don't need to just protect, bringing this together in a single database. We need to protect the APIs or the security up there as well.
You have to give permission for use and for transportability of your health records.
Yeah. Have you ever signed one of those things? You just scroll down, hit accept. You don't even read it.
I mean, Fern was just talking about people who are purposely using different services so that people don't get enough information about them. And here you are, Troy, talking about consolidating it.
I don't want them to. Just to be clear, I don't want this to happen. So, talk to your senators, talk to your legislators, and we do not want this to happen for sure.
Just drop an MCP server in the middle of all of it.
So just fun fact, I do not use my real name for my Uber account or my Lyft account.
Really?
Yeah. And sometimes I forget what name I give them, and I give them my real name. They're like, "Oh, wrong Uber."
Oh. So okay. So this is interesting. Like, what's the purpose of the driver not knowing your real name?
Oh, I don't know. It's just I'm just paranoid. I mean, even Starbucks does not have my name. So if they call out they call out a name that I had put into my Starbucks account, and I forget sometimes. So they're standing there waiting for my drink. I'm like, oh shit.
They're like, Frank.
Frank. Joey, over here. Joey, your drink is ready right now. It's funny.
And then they're like staring at you like, Frank, your drink is
guy in the restaurant. They're like, Frank.
Yeah, this guy, his name is Frank, but he's not picking up his drink. So I don't know. I think I've never hidden my name like that. I had my last name, but we've talked about that before. That's just more like salespeople reaching out. If they have your full name, it's like, okay.
But aren't you worried if you're standing by Starbucks and you're waiting for somebody to call your name? They're like, oh, there's Fern.
I would think that if I'm at a Starbucks, the podcast is so big, they already know. Yeah. They're like, oh yeah, there's that guy.
So you should change your name to DTF.
Yeah.
DTF Cyber Podcast and have them scream it.
Yeah.
And then purposely don't pick up the drink so that you get free advertising.
Probably DTF Podcast. That's the name of the Starbucks drink. Or the name on the Starbucks drink. Yeah. I don't know. I guess there's certain things that I care about. And so one of them, like being, this is more so for my wife, but with the kids, she doesn't ever have us post any pictures of them anywhere. So most people don't even know I have kids. Fewer people know what they actually look like. So I'm kind of like Michael Jackson with his kids, but not as rich as Michael Jackson. Obviously, but my wife is always like, people know that I have kids, but if there's pictures of my kids that they've seen, it's always the back of their heads. They've never actually seen their face. And like anything that I post with my kids, people don't even know what they look like unless they're family or they've met them in person. So I think to some extent we do keep some things private, but yeah, if I'm cooking, I need to know how many tablespoons are in a quart. So I'm asking that question, random number thing, but I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this stuff being kept all the time, but I do agree that like if I ask very specific things about my life, about the things that I have and the things that I own, that becomes a very good canvas for someone to paint on and say, hey, like we know what Fern has. We know what he cares about. We know the questions that he asks. Now we can take that in and really social engineer something that would actually get me. So we've talked about the last couple of weeks, the toll roads in Arizona. I mean, I was driving to California, so I knew I had a toll fee to pay, but I didn't actually think that there was anything in Arizona. So that was a little weird, but had it said, hey, you owe money on the toll roads in California, because I happened to be on a ChatGPT saying, where are the best places to go in San Diego? Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, Fern was in San Diego. He had to have passed by these toll roads. Now we know, hey, you haven't paid your toll roads for your recent, passing through our city. I would be like, oh yeah, that's right. Would I click the link? Probably not. But it would get me to think or to act in a way that they would want. But I know enough to not click on a link that I get through a text. Not everyone.
No, but right? Because of all these APIs, like Troy, you're saying, all these APIs, we're now plugging in AI into our calendars or directly into our emails. And so it doesn't have to be an actual prompt response.
Okay.
It could just maybe automatically put calendar reminder to pay the toll. And see where this is going? Now it becomes a little more complex. It's not.
So Damian, did you see the recent viral video of the AI phones talking to each other? Now, for the listeners, I don't know if it was real or not. It sure looked real, and it was kind of viral, but it's two different AI agents. One is an AI assistant to help somebody book a calendar invite and change their username or password. And the other one was a user agent at a company that was there to facilitate some of those things. So there's two AI agents talking to each other. And they realize that there's a third AI agent listening in the middle. So they change into their own cryptic language and start talking to themselves in a whole different foreign language. And the guy in the middle, the AI listening, actually changed along with them and was talking back and forth in this gibberish talk. So here you go with that exact example of when it's the AI talking to the AI, and they're able to go cross from your calendar AI to help you book appointments to now reach into some other thing that they have access to accidentally and get information they shouldn't have access to. It just kind of spirals out of control. So it is definitely a privacy issue. And I'm a big proponent of data privacy. And so I want to make sure that we do keep our eyes on this and keep our ears to the ground on this topic.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that video was that's the word, debunked. I saw this video, if not the same one, a similar one where I think it was two phones, where it almost sounded like R2D2 talking to another R2D2, and same exact situation where something was being done and then it kind of went offline in different voice. But yeah, they said that was fake. So I'm not sure about the one with three phones, but it is interesting that, but this goes back to mal, mis, and disinformation. that's just easy for people to make nowadays, especially with a lot of these tools that people have access to. So the bottom line is, if you can't see it, if you can't, if you seeing's believing, like, it almost feels like a lot of people are fake nowadays. So you just have to, you have to meet them in person.
Trust no one.
Yeah.
Or anything.
I thought Troy was fake until we met him in person.
That's right.
He's an AI bot.
All AI generated. I love it.
He's AI generated. Well, okay. I don't want to, keep tapping on the OpenAI stuff because we got other stories to get to. But the next one is related to privacy. And it has a special place in my heart because I used to be an AT&T customer. Their service is terrible in Arizona, at least where I live. So we moved to another carrier, but we had it in 21. And based on this article, what I'm finding, and I actually remember getting the notice in the mail about this breach, right? So I am a victim, okay, of this breach. And they said, hey, this stuff is compromised, blah, blah, blah. 86 million records are out there, okay? Now, of these 86 million records, I think it says something like 44 million-ish were duplicates or accounts, same account, different address, but essentially the same account. So we'll say 45 million just to be safe. Now, this was in 21. Resurfaced in 24. But it's back again in 25. And it's back and better than ever. Because now, not only for your phone number and your address, it has your date of birth and your social security encrypted along with it. So it's out there being sold from what I know.
Well, I think it was encrypted. Now it's decrypted.
Oh, okay. Okay. But it's been repackaged. So they took it and they made it a little bit better. So for anyone that's a threat actor out there that wants to get your information, before they had your phone number, they text you, they call you, they try and get you to pick up the phone, whatever. Now they've got your social, they've got your date of birth. And the last time I checked, when you apply for a credit card, you need a name, address, date of birth, and the social. All of that is in one spot.
Yeah.
I think we're doomed. I might be doomed.
Well, I mean, this definitely goes back to freeze your credit, folks, right now. That's you can't wait for somebody to take advantage of your credit, open a new bank account, buy a car or something. You got to freeze your credit account. But what I find interesting about this, and back in a couple of companies I worked at as their security leader, we were always investigating these big dumps of information on the dark web. And we would see the threat actors take that information and repackage it. In other words, they would just, either shrink it or rename the title and put that same information back up for sale, trying to monetize that data. And so that worked for a long time. But what's interesting about this case is that the threat actors have now combined a data breach of telephone numbers along with other social security numbers. So they took the time to correlate name, date of birth, social, a phone number, whatever it is, and put those things together so that they could have this super, information. And so all those scam texts, all those scam emails you were getting are now, they're going to have a little bit more information to try to make it more realistic for you, for your families, and for your employees to be tricked.
Yeah. So they probably didn't take the time to do it. They probably used AI.
Still lazy.
Naturally. Well, that just highlights again, threat actors using AI to be faster, better, stronger. Damian, I think at RSA, I heard somebody ask me, prove it. I'm like, prove what? And prove that threat actors are using AI against us. I'm like, well, there's a lot of evidence, but this is another great example. They most certainly must have for that kind of record count to put those things together. But we are going to continue to see threat actors using AI against us at a growing and a scary pace.
Yeah. And they probably didn't use a private corporate LLM. It's probably out there. So not only is your data out because of incident, but now it's floating around there for other people to manipulate and do stuff with.
Yeah, I think the best answer you could have for that person, Troy, was tell me your high school student doesn't use ChatGPT to cheat on their essays. There's literally high school kids using a GPT to help them cheat. You think very technical, capable threat actors aren't doing the same thing at a higher level? I don't know. If someone asked me that question, not necessarily being a security expert or having 20 years of experience, I'd be like, man, you must live under a rock, because even my kids use some stuff for stuff that they do. everyone's using it, right? So to assume that people aren't is either naive or living under a rock, or you're just wing.
Assume that everyone's using it.
I think you should. I think everyone should just assume that it's been used to some extent. I'm going to give you guys a hint. I use AI for this podcast. Like if your boy Fern's using AI for this podcast, you could bet your ass there's a lot of other people using it for
the record, not AI as in generating us, but helping with the whole process of editing sound.
Yeah, it just comes with, to edit an episode is a lot of work, and there's tools out there that help streamline it. So yeah, we're real, you're real. Troy's been confirmed real now that he's been in person, but I think it's definitely, maybe naive is not the right word, but I definitely feel like the expectation should be that at some extent, everyone has either touched or entered data into an LLM somewhere, somehow. And that the goal should be understanding how they've done it and what you can do to protect the business from a Samsung incident, right? But yeah,
accidentally putting data into that you're not supposed to.
Yeah, and I think for them specifically, it was their code that they were using for some application. So I guess to get back to the AT&T, like now you can get a text that says, "Hey, person, security or social security ending in boom, 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 1, 2, 3, 4. You get that and your social security number and it has it in your text and you're like, oh, this is more legitimate feeling than anything that I've ever gotten before.
Yeah, I think Troy had a good point, and I don't want this to get lost, right? Lock your credit. So I think that's the one thing you can do to stop people from leveraging that information. Just assume it's already out there. Right? Assume your data is out there. Assume your social security number is not confidential anymore.
Yeah.
Everybody knows where you live. You got your phone number. They probably know where you work. Look you up on LinkedIn. So just assume it's there. Make sure you lock your credit. I think that's one thing. But I think what we're probably going to have to do, and hopefully a lot of institutions are implementing more tighter controls before they grant new lines of credit, loans, new accounts, because it's way too easy today to be able to pretend to be somebody that you're not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely way easy. I don't know. I feel like we're headed towards the doomsday at some point.
Well, I mean, this is really just fraud at scale. Basically, we've been dealing with human fraud for thousands of years and con men and so on. And I think this is just the evolution of it. Just we have the tools now to make it faster and easier for them, but we're still falling for the same, urgency, and you feel bad for someone, even romance scams, which I had never understood how somebody could fall for a romance scam and send money across the sea to somebody they don't know. I feel bad for those victims because those are very emotional, very emotional. So my point is, this is just con man stuff now, just with the added invent of AI. It's so much easier for them to accomplish. I do say that, I have to talk to my family now because with this social security number thing, it's going to trick a lot of folks that are not technically savvy. Those are listeners to this podcast likely are in the industry or know a lot about tech, but it's our families, our kids, our moms, dads, those folks who may not be around technology very often to understand that this is something that they may see and they may need to ignore.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this podcast, 4th of July is coming up. You're probably going to be hanging out with a lot of your friends. Hopefully buy some water, maybe with a hamburger in your hand. And you're talking to your best friend next to you that they're not in tech. Maybe they're just not technical at all. I think something you should say is, hey, have you locked your credit? I have. Have you? And they're like, well, why would I do that? Oh, AT&T. Or you just not even necessarily ask if they have AT&T, but expect that if they didn't have AT&T, yeah, their information is still out there available, right? So,
hey, Fern, I get this a lot. I get this comment from folks all the time, which really just kind of grinds on my nerves. It's like, I don't have anything that anybody would want. I don't have any money. I don't have any this. I don't have any that. I have a lot of bills. I can come and pay my bills. People joke all the time about, I wouldn't lock my credit because there's nothing there somebody could get. That's not true because they can impersonate you. They can get a driver's license in your name. They can get a speeding ticket that you have to go and prove yourself is not the person who got the ticket to the officer. They can open accounts in your name, and those things come on, they can come in the form of collections. They can put a lien against your property, your real property. So there's a lot of consequences for not doing something to, very minimal, like just call the credit bureaus and block your credit. Will save you a ton of headache. My sister had her purse stolen, and the person got a speeding ticket with her driver's license. And it took my sister about 2 years to get that off, all squared away, because the police didn't believe it wasn't her driving the car. She had to go in and do all this work. So long story short, even if you don't think that you have anything anybody would want, definitely lock your credit, because there is something that threat actors will use against you.
Yeah. Even if you have nothing, the worst case scenario is they open a credit card based on your credit, and then they just blow it up, right? Like a $10K credit card. All of a sudden, it's like $2K here, $2K there, 5 times. You got 10 grand in debt that you didn't even buy. You had technically nothing for them to steal, but they used your credit worthiness and stole from a business, right? So I think regardless of what you have or what you don't have, stopping or freezing your credit, which is free to do, by the way, right?
Yeah, I think it is. And if you don't want to do it manually, I think there's probably services that will do it for you.
Yeah, I think you have to call each bureau individually, right? But I'm fairly certain there's one that does.
But sometimes it's good enough just to lock 1 or 2 of them, not all of them.
Okay.
Because once it's viewed as locked, I think they do stop. But you can also monitor it. I think there's a lot of credit cards include credit monitoring for free.
Yeah.
You can see your FICO score and any new accounts that are opened.
Yeah, they do that with like a Credit Karma, for example, right? So, Credit Karma, if you hear this, let us know. Okay. Well, so now that people have all this information, they can get access to it. They can personalize how they want to engineer, right? Locking your credit is by far the fastest thing or quickest thing to do that'll help prevent any fraud happening or new credit related things happening on your account. Regardless if you have anything or not, doesn't matter. It's still possible. And if you have terrible credit, well, why have it get any worse by accident?
Got it, just to make it worse.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, my credit's terrible. Like, okay, well, you want it to get worse, right? So, and then that's just another headache to deal with. So, regardless of what you have or what you don't have, lock it up. But is there anything that like I'm not thinking of where, say, I don't do anything, and I just like, oh, you know what? I just take the position of nothing's going to happen. Something does happen. Like, how much of a pain is it to get it fixed afterwards?
It's probably going to take years, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not easy to repair your credit, even if it's proven that it wasn't you. I think that's always the challenge. I mean, from the other side, though, I do want to look at, is there anything that companies can do better to protect that information? Or should they be treating this more seriously?
Yeah.
Because if we see so many of these private information breaches happening, whether it's, in this case, AT&T, healthcare organizations, I think every week in the news, we have a data breach.
Yeah. And what's crazy is like when you go to the medical office, you have to fill like you take your kid in or you do something new, you have to fill out all the information, name, address, all that fun stuff. They always have a social. I'm just like, what? Like, what is this?
I don't fill it in.
Like, why? Like, I don't even, we'll say 6 or 7 years ago, I would ask them like, why do you need this? And the people at front desk were like, oh, like it's just there. It's on the form. I don't know. So I never used to do it. Now I don't even ask them why they need it. I just like, you know what? There's no reason. Right. So I don't put it out there, and I'm sure a lot of these, smaller locations, smaller businesses that always ask for this information, there's no way they're protecting it. Like there's literally no way feasible in my mind that a mom and pop shop or a small business or even like some of these small organizations have the same controls in place as some of the larger like credit card companies, and even the credit card companies get whacked. So bottom line is don't share your information unless you actually need to. And if you have anything or don't have anything, freeze the credit, right? So, okay. Any parting thoughts on that one or?
No, I just want to echo Damian's sentiment. With all the breach fatigue we have, we hear about a new data breach every single day. We're spending billions and billions of dollars on cybersecurity protections, and those breaches are happening at companies that have tremendous teams and investment and leaders. So it just goes back to the old saying is that, somebody is going to get into your data, which goes back to the very first story with ChatGPT. The longer you hold that data, it's still at risk. So we want to, minimize our risk by getting rid of data as soon as possible. And I think that's a good point to wrap that one up on, Fern.
Okay. So move on to the next one. But before we go to the next topic, we have something very important to talk about. If you enjoy these conversations around security, the news, what's the latest in security, obviously hit the subscribe button. But there is an event coming up known as CruiseCon West. Dates are October 2nd through the 6th. I think it's leaving out of California.
Long Beach.
Leaving out of LBC. So if you're in Arizona, how like a 12-hour drive?
No, come on.
Yeah.
5 hours.
It's like 6. Okay, it's a 6-hour drive. If you're from Arizona, you can drive to the LBC with Snoop Dogg Double G and hop on to CruiseCon West. And because we care about our listeners so much, yours truly spoke with the one and only Ira Winkler. We had a conversation where he said, you know what? Anyone that's a DTF podcast listener, Cyber Podcast listener, has a special code. That code is Cyber Podcast 10. You put that on your checkout screen, poof, 10% disappears. You just save 10% for typing less than 15 letters, I think is what it is. I think it's less than 15. But minimal effort on your part. And you go on this event, and there's big dogs. I mean, we're talking some pretty heavy names, some heavy hitters in the security industry that are presenting, that are talking, and they're all going to be in a room together, and there's no gates. You show up, as long as you have a ticket, you're welcome to join any of the events. There's no special parties. There's no closed doors. It's an open environment for everyone to learn and become better. So we want to make sure we include that today. So if you're listening, now you know. So we'll include a link with the episode. So when you go to this link or click on the link to go to the checkout screen and you want to get that fancy ocean view cabin, save 10%. Cyber Podcast 10, and they'll take care of you.
So learn about cybersecurity and have a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
And for just to be clear, Snoop Dogg will not be on this cruise. That is not going to happen. However, there are some cybersecurity luminaries going on this cruise that went on the last cruise as well. The speaker lineup is phenomenal. I don't want to call anybody out by name because I will forget someone, but there are some absolute luminaries that are going to be given information on this cruise that you don't want to miss. No matter what level you are in cybersecurity, whether you're just starting out or if you're already a CISO, this is definitely the cruise for you. And it's only 4 to 4.5 hours from Vegas, by the way.
I will call out one person, right? A legend in the cyber world, Mr. Timothy Youngblood, will be there. He will be presenting. And I happened to speak with him about a week ago. One-on-one, we had a phone call. And one of the most well-respected, or not well, most highly respected security professionals in the industry will be there. That's all I need to say. That's all I need to say. So that's all I'm going to say. And we're going to move on to the next topic, right? And we're going to preface this with, everyone knows that I work in tech sales, kind of, right? Like it's kind of quasi like podcast. Like what does Fern actually do? So we'll just say this, but I'm not a security expert by any means. I just happen to have a lot of friends in security. And there's a lot of people out there saying a very specific phrase, cyber resilience. I mean, you got backup companies showing up talking about it. You got every company in some way ties their product to security. And I get it. Security sells, right? So you have to find a way to link up with where the money's coming from, right? Security is that area. But I don't know what I don't know. And I think there's a lot of people that are doing their best to understand their environments and protect it. But I also feel like there's a lot of misconceptions around it. So not necessarily a news story, but I've got two legends sitting with me today. So we're going to go through what we don't know, what we don't know. So my first question What is that, Troy? Go ahead.
I was going to say, cyber resilience means a lot of things to a lot of people, but I will quote the famous Mike Tyson quote of everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. Cybersecurity resiliency does not mean that you won't have a breach, but it's how you react after you've been punched in the face. That's what I consider cyber resiliency. And that's where most successful companies tend to lean. Not from we've never had a breach or we're never going to have a breach. It's we know that we could have one and here's how we're going to respond. And we've practiced and we've practiced and we've practiced.
Well, so let's back up to 25 years ago when I started my career. The biggest things that I worked on back then was disaster recovery and business continuity.
The two least sexiest things.
I know, but something crazy happened. 9/11.
Okay.
And there were data centers and a lot of data was in those towers. So data resiliency became, we didn't call it data resiliency so much more like disaster recovery, because that's obviously a disaster and we had to recover somewhere. So fast forward now, and it's kind of funny that we're talking about cyber resiliency, or maybe it should be cyber recovery or just system recovery. I think it's all the same thing. We're just evolving into, well, what could happen? So could your systems completely disappear one day? And what does that mean? And it could disappear because for a number of reasons. Could be your systems are down, or it could be ransomware. It's so, I don't know if it's necessarily a new topic, but how we apply, I think technology's changed. Cybersecurity has changed. Obviously, how we deal with data has changed. So today, that's still a huge topic. And I think the way we approach it in the next year, 2 years, 5 years is going to be really important for the industry.
What's really interesting is, Damian, we were talking about this earlier today, but there's a couple of new startups out there that are focusing on cyber resiliency and how to measure it. I thought that was pretty interesting. And I think you maybe spoke to them a little bit more, but how do you measure cyber resiliency? What is the way that you would articulate that?
Well, I think, first of all, do you even know whether your systems are backed up? I think we take that for granted, right? I think we all assume, let's put it into AWS or Azure or GCP, and I don't need to back it up. It's in a cloud system.
It's done. It's done for me, right? Like what was the big one? Microsoft backups, email backups. People just assumed that it was done automatically for them, but it actually wasn't. You had to pay for that separately. Like it didn't even come with like your E5 license, I think, right? So there's a lot of people assuming that things are being done because it's a cloud-based service, but the reality is it's missing.
Well, not only that, you can pick different regions where your data is sitting. So do you have your data spread out across different regions within like an AWS? What about redundant routing? You have that set up correctly. And so there's a lot to think about. And I know a lot of small businesses don't think about those things. A lot of larger ones will. But I think that's where a lot of these tools, Troy, are trying to just draw visibility into, what could happen or what your risks are if you were to lose, one route. Let's just say one route, not even the entire data center, not even an entire instance, just one route to that data. What would be the impact to your organization?
Absolutely. I have a curveball for you. I'm going to throw you. What about people resiliency? What if you have one rock star that handles a certain focus area and that's the only person you have that can do what that person does? And, they get another offer, they hit the lottery, whatever it is, and they're not there tomorrow. Do you have redundancy and resiliency for your people?
Here's a true story. I was a consultant one time and walked into a meeting and was just trying to get an understanding of their network architecture. And I can't remember if it was the director or the manager said, I can't remember his name. So we'll call him Bob. Oh, that's Bob. Ask Bob. He knows it all. Like, well, do you have any documents? And they're like, no, Bob knows it. But to Troy's point, what happens if something happened to Bob? Who else would be able to recreate that or at least document it to know how that network is architected? Right? That's a huge risk.
Yeah. I think it happens all the time. What do they call it? Tribal knowledge, right? Tech debt to some extent. Because, you got to think when people buy a new tool, they just kind of just pile on this debt of the predecessor tool.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, there's a lot of, so AI obviously is helping that quite a bit, where you can scan your network and hopefully automatically generate documentation. And I think in this case, there are tools that are trying to help measure the risk, or at least give you an idea of what that risk is if you're missing certain resilience components.
Yeah. And these companies,
one of the most underrated roles in any company is the tech writer. I loved my tech writers. A couple of companies ago, they were writing out all of our policies and procedures and our procedures and all the things that we had to do to back up, to recover, not just writing the policies, but writing a step-by-step guide that if somebody new walked in, you hand them a manual, they could go recreate that same process. That is such an underrated position. So I always advise people to invest in two things right off the bat. Number one is project managers, unsung heroes. Absolutely. Number two is tech writers. And now with the advent of Synthesia and of these other AI tools to help you create amazing technical documentation, you can shortcut that time frame with a good tech writer and really document not only your policies, your procedures, but your methods and your operandi as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you even need those positions anymore if AI is going to take them over?
I think you still need somebody to man, to be at the wheel today. Maybe get better along with time, but I still think you need somebody to steer the car if it goes off the rails.
So I got a question for you guys. There's a lot of, like you said, 20 years ago, backup was a thing. I have a buddy who has been in the backup space for 15, 20 years. He would always complain, man, I can't get any money. I'm trying to buy this stuff. I can't get no money. No one cares about backups. Now, all of a sudden, you call it cyber resilience. People like cyber. I like that. I want to buy some of that. And my thought is, okay, so there are vendors out there that technically would be considered backup space, which is rebranded as cyber resilience. But they're usually talking to the infrastructure teams, right? They're not always talking to the security leaders. Because frankly, everyone wants to talk to security. So no one has time to talk to everyone. So if they're in infrastructure, like say, for example, they're a secondary storage vendor, right? Maybe they're a backup software. They're not always talking to security, but they're talking in terms of security to this infrastructure team. What I find interesting is how often do these people actually interface with security executives? And how often is the pitch of what our product can do integrated into a security roadmap or even a business resiliency plan overall? Because like you mentioned earlier, Damian, there's a lot of times people don't know what is protected versus what isn't. A lot of assumptions. And what I'm wondering is it possible for companies that kind of go down this route of backup or DR or these different vendors that they can purchase from that aren't actually talking to security, but they buy the product and click a box somewhere and say, hey, we're backing up or we're doing all this stuff, but they're not actually doing it with the right controls in place?
Yeah. And Fern, I think you just scratched the surface of a massive, massive problem and probably why most breaches happen right here. This is really going to be maybe controversial to some, but it's going to be obvious to others that this is the number one problem in cybersecurity. This is why companies are continually getting breached. This is why companies are spending billions of dollars on cyber, and it's not effective because not just backup and disaster recovery and your data backups and your infrastructure, but also your identity stack is normally under the CIO, who has a whole different budget from the CISO, who is just an influencer and usually finds out about the things that the CIO has bought after they've bought it. And now you have to implement it instead of the other way around where you're actually planning how to do things securely and you're deploying capital to buy things that the infrastructure team has to manage. And so for years and years and years, this has been a knockdown, drag out fight between the two, competing budgets, competing priorities, competing manpower. This is where companies, and I'm talking to CEOs and CFOs of companies now, to say, this is where we should shift our paradigm and let security leaders be technical leaders and have priority over those projects. Because as long as we allow purely technical folks to buy solutions that have to be implemented by security as an afterthought, you're going to have problems. Because as you mentioned, there's great things out there to solve these problems. The infrastructure team is looking at it from a whole different lens, whether it's speeds and feeds or ease to use, ease to administer, ease to deploy, rather than is it the right security tool to secure my business and my data?
I don't know if it's always the case. I do think there is some friction there. I agree with you, but these teams have to come together.
Yeah.
Right. I've seen a lot of friction between, the IT or infrastructure team and security.
Mm-hmm.
And there shouldn't be that friction. I think everybody has the same goals, which is ultimately the company goals.
Yeah. We're going to get a paycheck, right?
Right.
Company needs to make money.
So you don't have to be protective of your area. I think there has to be conversation of what needs to happen. And if that is, having a highly available network that's very fast versus putting in security controls that might slow that down. I think there's a way to do both. You just have to come together and talk about it. I think that conversation is, have the same network speeds and low latency and have the right security controls. I think there's ways to do that if you come together and just talk about it.
Yeah. And Damian, I want to call this out very clearly. This is not retrospective of any company that I've worked at specifically at all. This is case study after case study after case study of breaches across the entire industry, from healthcare to financial services, you name it, where, the percentages are going down. But right now, the CISO reports into the CIO in a lot of cases, more than 50% still, according to Gartner. And so when your boss is the technical lead, you get second fiddle when his project takes priority, period. And if he believes that his, engineering resources outweigh the impact of security, then his engineering resources or her engineering resources are going to win. And that is not securing the company. And so the CISO and the CIO have very competing priorities and responsibilities. Some companies manage that very well. Some companies do not manage that well. So this is not a slight on anyone in particular, but I want to call it out because it's a huge problem in our industry that we're not talking about. We're not talking about how to make this work. I'm not saying that the CIO should report to the CISO, but they should definitely not report into the CIO. It should be somebody that's kind of neutral, maybe their chief legal officer, their chief financial officer, somebody who can have a whole different lens that can be an arbiter of what is that balance between security and infrastructure.
Yeah, one is not above the other. I think they've got to be equal peers that can essentially hold each other accountable.
Yeah, I kind of look at it as not a family, but we'll just say like a husband and a wife. For example, my wife does a lot of stuff with the kids. She schedules stuff, and then if she can't do it, then I'll do it. But if I have stuff to do, like today, for example, I had a couple of appointments running around, a couple of phone calls. I took the kid to an appointment, brought him back home. Then I came here, and I said, "Hey, the kids are going to go do something else. I can't do that, right?" But we communicated with each other, so she knew what I had to do today, and I knew what she needed to get done, and we kind of worked together, right? It wasn't, hey, I got my stuff, you got yours, you go figure it out. It's okay, I can get this done. I can take this kid to that. You're going to do this while I'm doing that. It's more of like a cooperative teamwork thing. And maybe that's just how it should be. It's not necessarily from last week. It's the answer of no, but this, what was it? The Department of No, but, right?
It's yes, but.
It's a yes.
Oh, the Department of Yes, but. It's not that. It's just, hey, we're just a team. You have your things to do. I have my things to do. How can we get them both done at the same time? But I've never been a CISO, so I don't know. But it definitely seems like there's a lot of contention between
not always
different departments.
Yeah, I think I don't know if it's still a big topic. I think we've been talking about this for the past 2 years. Does it still happen? Yes. Should it? Probably not. But Troy's right. If you are not on the same page and the technology teams are fighting, it gives an avenue for the attackers to come in and not be noticed.
Yeah. Here's a great test. If you are wondering how my company, I work at is, if you were going to implement a new identity platform, who would make that decision? If you're going to implement a new ERP system, who makes that decision? If you're going to implement a new data recovery backup resiliency platform, who implements that? Now, you may say the CIO has ultimate decision and budget, but the CISO has influence and this, that, and the other. But, there are so many of my peers I hear that have had to respond after a purchase decision has been made, and now they have to implement a tool they would never have chosen because it doesn't fit the current security needs of the industry, which is changing, as we know, at light speed. So I'm not also saying that security should win every argument. I don't want to say that security should have the final say and hammer on every decision. But what I've seen is the balance of power has been way out of whack for a while. So now we need to bring that pendulum back to the middle.
Hot take. Why don't you just become a CIO then? Right?
Yeah. I mean, if it's your specialty and you're a CISO that is also technically savvy, that would be something that may be amenable to you and your company. However, we do know that CIOs who are also the CISO have internally competing priorities within themselves that have to make decisions. Are you really making that in a security lens? Or are you now making it from an infrastructure lens? It's okay for mid-market and smaller companies, but as you get into enterprise, those two have to be very separate. And I do recommend they report into different people.
Okay. It's just something that came to mind. Like, well, if you can't beat them, join them, right? Maybe.
No, it's a totally different, function, different set of focus, really. So,
well, it's a different set of focus, but are you telling me that a CEO that hires a CIO that happens to know a lot about security wouldn't be an awesome hire?
No, what Troy's saying is then you're competing within yourself as well. I don't necessarily think that's always the case, because I think there are people, I do know a few people who have both titles,
okay,
and they do really well at it. But there's a lot of communication that have to happen. Okay, it's not one win or the other. There's risk.
I don't know if the audience knows, but my wife, as an example, is a CIO and CISO, but she grew up in the United Nations running technology and satellites for the UN, and then pivoted into cybersecurity over 10 years ago. So she has a great balance of both. And there are tons of people out there like her who do great in that role as a dual role. But yeah, I would caution that if you have that role and you're a CIO and a CISO, make sure that your competing priorities are clear to yourself. So you're making those decisions, above board, even within yourself.
Interesting. Yeah, I thought I cracked the code. It's like, I know how to fix the problem. I can fix it now. I'm like, no.
Honestly, I went the other way. I don't know about you, Troy, but I started on the IT and infrastructure side, and I switched over to security.
I think that's how a lot of people do it, because what's the phrase? You can't protect what you don't understand, right? That's probably a big reason why a lot of people.
A lot of people are starting their careers directly in security. I know that's another topic, debate that I've heard, that you can't do that or you shouldn't do that.
Well, that's what I love about this industry, is that it's, everybody's journey is a little different. I started in law enforcement, IT forensics, doing cyber investigations, and then pivoted into IT networking and, became, routing certified at the ISP level, and then also continued my security journey. So I do have both sides of that. And I think it's so important for people to understand IT so that they can be a better security person. Understanding networking and TCP IP and all those things really help me understand how threat actors pivot and move. So very helpful.
So I mean, that does help you have those conversations, because you can hopefully be a better team player because you understand the other side. I'm wondering though about this next generation that doesn't have that networking background or the infrastructure background, that's going directly into security and really just doesn't grasp what the other side is trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I told my wife the other day, I said, some of these kids that talk the way that they talk are going to be our doctors when we're old. And they're going to be taking care of us, and they're over here seeing all kinds of random phrases that I've never heard. It's like, man, I can't believe this.
You have a heart problem, so you got to go see the heart Rizzler.
Yeah.
You
have a skibbity disease, no cap, fire.
Straight up. For real.
Get the dub.
Oh man, we sound like old men.
This is fun.
We sound like a bunch of old guys that need to go check on our hips here in a second. Yeah, no doubt. No, not even bomb.com. That's long gone, and now it's skibbity riz brain rot toilets. I've got 2 kids, so I actually played video games with them last night. We were playing Fortnite. I got my daughter a PlayStation 5 for her birthday. She had a 4 before, so I got the 4. Now she has the 5. And all 3 of us are playing Fortnite together. And they have friends that they play with. Oh my gosh, I feel dumber now because of all the words that they use. So, warning to all the parents out there, if you want to play Fortnite with your kids, don't. You might just lose a few brain cells. So I fell on that sword for you guys. But I think that's good for today. I think we're just about an hour or so for the episode. So not too long, not too short, just right. AKA Goldilocks, right? Just perfect. I think, was it Goldilocks in 3 pairs?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Okay. So we have a Goldilocks episode for you. Things to remember. lock your credit, freeze it, do something with it. Don't just expect that if you have nothing or if you have a lot, that no one's going to target you. Expect that you will be a target at some point, especially if you had AT&T. The other one is OpenAI. Just be careful about what you're talking about with it. Be aware that that isn't private. Most likely will not be private, and that there will be records of it stored. So if you're doing things that you shouldn't, maybe find another way. Or if you're doing things that you should, keep doing them. The last one is, we don't know what we don't know. But what we do know is, as long as everyone's talking with each other, between the infrastructure, the security teams, the dev teams, everyone can kind of come together for a common goal, which is business continuity, businesses staying operational, businesses making money, because if they're not making money, you're not getting paid. So do your best to just work with your peers. Make sure everyone's happy. Make sure everyone feels heard. And that if you're in security, you do your best to be the group of yes, but also be very understanding of perceptions that they might have about you or your team. So
yeah, just, stay curious. Obviously, listening to podcasts like this, I don't know if we're always right, but we got an opinion. Let's try get the conversation going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just have a dialogue, open a conversation and speak with people, because chances are they know things that you don't, and it's the other way around a lot of times. So, but you will never find that out without making the phone call or picking up or having a conversation, especially if you return to office. Now you just walk to the water cooler. You don't have to hit them up on Teams anymore. So I guess with that, we'll close it out. Any final thoughts from you, Troy?
Yeah, just Cyber Podcast 10. Don't forget the nice cruise this October. Don't miss out. And now you know. Knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe.
And with that, we're out.